This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast is brought to you in partnership with Tesco.
A lot of it is deliberately targeting the UK. This isn't kind of a random, things are coming through in an unconnected way. We are being targeted because of our lapse controls. It's kind of known that there is a route through the UK, coming through Dover, going into markets, on streets, on retail shelves, in restaurants, wherever. And that sort of intelligence gathering that could shed more light on this would help us to prevent it. But at the moment, the people that are doing this work are doing it against the background of very, very difficult and trying circumstances.
Illegal meat imports leave livestock farmers exposed to animal disease. Sheep producers face a clampdown on tail docking and lamb castration, and how a professional approach could help recruit more people into agriculture. Welcome to the Farmers Weekly podcast. I'm Johann.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
And it's straight to our top story. UK farmers face a higher risk of animal disease because illegal meat imports aren't being routinely tested. It comes despite warnings that illegally imported pork is a high risk for disease entering the country. Here's Alistair Driver, editor of Farmers Weekly's sister publication, Pig World.
Well, it's another interesting angle to a story that really has been rumbling on and causing frustration for a very, very long time now. And yet we've known and we've reported that huge amounts of illegal meat are coming into the country. I think there was 10 tons in 2 weeks in September. But the whole thing has been underfunded. They're doing fantastic work at Dover, the Port Health Authority, much admired by the industry. But it is it is fundamentally under-resourced. And of course, if we could test, we would have a much greater insight into the risk and to, maybe where the product's coming from. And, I guess what it comes down to is that simply this, that there is, very limited resource available. And they're choosing, rightly or wrongly, given the resource, not to invest it in testing as they do in other countries, I think, as the report notes. But as I say, it comes down to funding.
And Alistair, the argument is that this is a missed opportunity because testing could help us combat illegal meat imports.
Yeah, and this is part of the story, isn't it? I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, the volumes coming through, and it would appear that a lot of it is deliberately targeting the UK. This isn't kind of a random things are coming through randomly in an unconnected way. We are being targeted because of our lapse controls. For example, there are a lot of African swine fever controls in place in Romania, which means that they can't legally move product out of the area. It's kind of known that there is a route through the UK, often in what are called white lands, or the equivalent of coming through Dover, where there is only 20% coverage. So while a lot of it is being detected, a lot of it isn't. Then it's going into markets somewhere in the UK, maybe appearing on streets, on retail shelves, in restaurants, wherever. And yes, that sort of intelligence gathering, as you say, anything that could shed more light on this would help us to prevent it. But at the moment, the people that are doing this work are doing it against the background of very, very difficult and trying circumstances.
Alistair Driver from Pig World, thank you. Sir Louise, Hugh, illegal meat imports coming into the country, when they're seized, they're not being tested, not routinely anyway. I thought Brexit meant we were going to be taking back control of our borders.
Yeah, and getting an extra 350 million quid a week to spend and all that craziness. No, it doesn't, does it? I think what perpetuates the meat coming in, the reason there's more meat coming in now, obviously, compared to, say, pre-2016, when the border was a lot more open, is cost, isn't it? That we all know, and those of us farming cattle and sheep know the values where they are now compared to where they were 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. And that's what's driving this trade, is the fact that, one, they can get away with it. Well, they could probably get away with it before. And there was no great change in the whole pan-European customs, because the far side of Europe, the customs arrangements are still the same there. But of course, you've got some riskier countries, I suppose, within the EU customs area. It's cost. That's what's brought it in. Brexit, yes, it should have slapped down on our borders. But of course, no one's wanted to spend any money on. They spent a shed ton of money, we know that, and they built Steventon. They've actually built the customs point up on the hill just above the port of Dover, Bastion. But they then decided not to use that and to use Steventon instead, 20-odd miles up the road to Ashford. They spent a load of money on all of this, but they still don't have, some would say, not forensic, but thorough enough processes and protocols by which you can search every vehicle. And then if you think about it, to do that, the infrastructure, the space, the concrete, the people, the scanners, it's huge. If you're going to search every white van coming through Dover, no one's ever searched every white van coming through Dover. So the spend just hasn't happened. I suppose but the reason I think where we are now is because of the cost benefit of nicking some meat in Eastern Europe and chucking it in a white van in a bin bag and bringing it into Dover and selling it to someone in London.
And Louise, this is our top story in Farmers Weekly this week, and food safety expert Professor Chris Elliott saying he's appalled that DEFRA still isn't doing these checks. There's a school of thought that says illegal meat coming into the country is increasing food poisoning cases. It's that bad.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Elliott does say, doesn't he, that he has given repeated warnings to government, but they don't seem to have heeded any of those warnings. And as Hugh has pointed out, does it all come down to costs and resources? We don't really know. I mean, presumably there's a very rapid test that can be done when some of this meat is seized. I've no idea, by the way, what the cost of that is, but I assume that they do exist. I was looking into this a little bit more earlier today, and it seems that there were 235 tonnes of illegal meat products seized in 2024. So I suspect that went up in 25 for the reasons that Hugh's just outlined. Of course, it is a concern. But the other point, and again, Hugh's just made that very eloquently, is that what about the meat that does get through, i.e. the meat that isn't seized? Because that must still represent a risk. So I'm not sure that this whole biosecurity threat, if you like, is going to go away anytime soon, because it's just too lucrative for some of these people at the moment. As you said, the price of protein's gone right up. And we don't seem to be manning the borders in the way that perhaps we should be.
Now, some people might be wondering, why test this illegally imported meat? The fact it's been seized is the main thing. But testing it, Hugh, could help us trace it back to where it's come from and help determine the disease risk, whether it's foot and mouth or ASF, African swine fever, and target resources accordingly where they're needed most.
I suppose you could do if you had some DNA from where you think it may have started out on the sheep farm in Romania or wherever, or the pig farm you could do that. You're right. There's an argument to say, whilst we should perhaps be testing purely from a surveillance and a curiosity point of view, or has it got any other nasty pathogens on it other than what it might just have by being not chilled for 48 hours as it drove across Europe? And also ascertaining what the biosecurity threat is from that. We know exactly the things that will be the threat, foot and mouth. If it's bone-in meat, foot and mouth will survive in the marrow of bones. You'll remember that around the time of 2001 of the foot and mouth outbreak, then there was a ban on bone-in imports purely because the theory was that what started that was a piece of bone with the marrow still in, and those viruses, the foot and mouth virus, will survive in that fat, in that lipid of the marrow. Whereas on the muscle, when an animal dies, the pH drops so quickly, which is part of the maturation process, that it kills the virus. Not to say completely, but it's pretty good at that. So foot and mouth's the obvious one. ASF's the other one that could come in. And this is the really key thing from the farming perspective. This is a huge biosecurity threat. Because of all the reasons we've just discussed, while there is more illegal meat coming in than ever there has before, the probability of something nasty being on a piece of this, it gets dumped in London in food service, someone uses it, the food waste that's left after it's been cooked or whatever gets chucked out in a bin. ends up in the countryside. Or it's the ham sandwich theory, isn't it? Oh, there's some dodgy meat comes in, someone throws the ham sandwich over the fence while they're out walking the dog in the home counties, and boom, you light the blue touch paper. So it's this whole biosecurity piece that people are worried about. And I think there is a genuine concern, and they're right to be concerned. And actually the cost of this, what would it cost to improve the amount of intercepts that happen at Dover, to improve the intelligence? Most of these vans coming in aren't even declaring that they've got meat on board, because people are saying, well, you've got the border post 22 miles up the road at Ashford. No wonder they're getting through, because they're not bothering to get. The amount of no-shows that don't go into Ashford are actually quite low, because they can see them, because the ones that they know are declaring they've got meat on board as they come in, they'll see if they drive by and they could investigate them. These people that are coming in are completely below the radar. They're not even declaring that they're bringing meat in. So there is a big risk. And the impact on UK livestock industry, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out the potential billions, as well as all the human and animal suffering that could happen if the very worst was to happen. So there really does need to be a stepping up at Dover, and not just a headline and a show of force. They actually need to increase the amount of intercepts, because that in itself could act as a deterrent if more people were having vehicles and property seized, and effectively their freedoms curtailed if they engage in this activity.
Hugh, given the disease risk from these illegal meat imports, it's vital that individual UK farms are themselves extra vigilant when it comes to biosecurity. Some farmers are, but some aren't, yeah?
Well, it depends what farm you're on and what sector you're in. If you go onto a poultry farm or a pig farm, you'll probably find that there is quite a lot being done in terms of biosecurity. But I would challenge anyone listening to this podcast, take me to a farm. I can think of dairy farms where there's a foot dip. We have foot dips here. I can take you to plenty of other farms, cattle and sheep farms, where there is no foot dip at all. And lots of people will throw that back in my face and say, what's the point? If I put a foot dip in the yard, I've got a footpath through the field. Da, 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 da. Yeah, I get that. But the reality is there's two things here, isn't there? Number one, I constantly, farmers will mention this to me and when conversation, and I say, yeah, it is really worrying. It does need something sorting out. But what are you doing to protect your herd and your farm? And this is something, farmers representatives can lobby all they like to try and improve the resources at the border. But this is something farmers can go out tomorrow and buy a can of disinfectant and put a foot dip in the yard. It's cheap as chips, and it's a bit of a barrier. I get that it doesn't stop someone in the field, but let's suppose a delivery driver coming into your yard to deliver a pallet or otherwise has some infectious material on their feet or on the vehicle. I don't know. Let's say it's on their feet. People are walking through that delivery area every day to get to the rest of the farmyard. Let's say the animals are beyond there. If there was a foot dip between the drop-off area and where all the animals were, that could be an absolute lifesaver, couldn't it? And doing nothing is not really an option. So I think as an industry, and particularly when I speak as a red meat producer, we need to do a heck of a lot more and become a heck of a lot more professional about how we, manage the biosecurity of our farm businesses. And that's not just at foot dip level, that's talking about herd health plans and all that sort of stuff as well. But we could do more than we do. As I say, some sectors, you go onto poultry sites, woe betide you if you don't go through a shower and get a paper boiler suit on and all that, and foot dips and everything else. And the same on pig sites. And exactly the same way when you walk into an abattoir, you've got to go through the whole cleaning thing and have clean foot. But it seems that, some farms don't think it applies to them, but they should really step up, as well as carry on asking for more resource at the border.
Now, in a statement, a DEFRA spokesperson said the government's working to safeguard the UK from a huge range of animal diseases. We help to prevent animal diseases entering or spreading in the UK through a combination of surveillance, diagnostics, research and rapid response when suspicions of a notifiable disease are reported.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And now we're joined by Natalie Smith from Tesco, this week's podcast partner and UK agriculture's biggest customer. Natalie, we're talking about ways to get more innovation on farm. It sounds great, but farmers want more practical ways of working smarter, don't they?
They do. And in a recent survey that we ran last year, only 4% of farmers actually felt that it was easy to get innovation out on farm. And of those farmers that we questioned, over half actually haven't introduced any innovation on farm over the past year. And obviously we recognise it's been a really difficult year and continues to be quite challenging. So farmers want to know that when they're going to invest in on-farm solutions, that it is actually going to deliver for them on their particular farm.
So you mentioned it's been a difficult year. There is a little bit of a disconnect there, though, isn't there?
I think so. There's quite a lot of funding opportunities out there. However, I think that's less at the farm level and at the point where you're starting to able to scale that on farm. So yeah, definitely an opportunity there for the future.
So how's Tesco helping farmers overcome this challenge?
I think given the amount of feedback we've had in this space, we recognise that on-farm innovation, understanding what's practical and deliverable in a farming environment is the space where we feel that we can really support and add value. So we've launched 2 low-carbon concept farms over the last year. And I guess that's the whole principle of those. It's showing what's possible, testing, learning, failing in some cases. It's so very much around how we can start to practically implement stuff on everyday working farms, share some of that risk, and also support in terms of sharing that information and data, and therefore starting to scale that up across our broader supply chain.
Natalie Smith from Tesco, thank you very much.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
Now, livestock farmers are being urged to respond to a consultation on government plans to ramp up animal welfare rules. It follows the publication of DEFRA's animal welfare strategy, which includes the phase-out of colony cage systems for egg-laying hens, the phase-out of high-concentration CO2 stunning for pigs prior to slaughter, and tighter restrictions on the castration and tail docking of lambs. Michael Priestley of the National Sheep Association.
I think the concern of the NSA, and I think others in the industry who I've spoken to, is that while I think everyone wants to see animal welfare as a priority, there is a risk that in trying to address one animal welfare issue, we actually create others, such as if we leave rams uncastrated, then there's a risk of unplanned pregnancies. If we end up having to anaesthetise lambs with needles, there's a risk there of creating a site for bacterial infection. If we try and move away from routine tail docking, which some people have done, then we risk fly strike problems through the summer. And we just need to make sure that in trying to improve one area of welfare, we're not inadvertently creating other welfare issues later on in the production cycle.
And Michael, animal welfare, a highly emotive subject, and the government advised on this topic by the Independent Animal Welfare Committee. The AWC isn't looking to ban practices like castration and tail docking, but what it says is that it wants them to be the exception, not the norm.
Yeah, something you will get from reading the report, Johann, is that the AWC is keen to investigate ways to move away from the routine job of tailing and castrating every ram. So this blanket approach, which many farms take, it might be that a ram born in the first cycle or a single-born ram could grow and be slaughtered before it hit puberty. We're talking about sort of 5 months, like 120 days. Well, in a lot of systems that say creep feed or lamb at a certain time of year, there's actually little risk of unplanned pregnancies. Similarly, if you lamb at a certain time of year, lamb early, you might actually get your lambs sold to the Easter market before fly strike season really starts. So there's a variety of systems with a variety of issues to any rule change. Some people with some breeds that shed wool or that have been bred for dag score, they actually don't have long tails. They don't have woolly rear ends, and the issue of fly strike is less. There is a lot open to interpretation, but it feels like there is the AWC does want things to change, although it does stress that will be a complicated thing to achieve.
So you're okay then, Michael, with this idea that farmers should question whether every lamb requires tail docking or castration, but what you're saying is that there's still a place for them. You're encouraging this idea of reduce, replace and refine rather than banning rubber rings across the board.
Yes, the 3 R's. People might have heard the 3 R's in relation to antibiotics. So reduce means possibly asking questions about whether this lamb needs to be managed for fly strike or castrated. Replace might be using another method. There are other methods available that are higher welfare. And then refining is maybe doing it on animals at a different age, or doing it with an anaesthetic or analgesic to manage the pain. We also sort of advocate for this job if it is needed, and in many cases it is actually a job done to prevent other welfare issues, is that the job needs to remain on the farm with the sheep keeper. And we just urge caution that we don't want the industry to sort of lead itself into creating other welfare problems down the line.
That's Michael Priestley from the National Sheep Association. Louise, this is a tug of war, I guess, between raising standards for animal welfare and making these reforms workable for farmers. It's about striking a balance.
Yeah, I mean, there has been a mixed reaction, hasn't there, really, to some of these announcements. I think it's fair to say that virtually everybody is committed to good and better animal welfare. The concerns that they may have are around costs and then also competition from imports. So we don't want to put ourselves at a disadvantage. I think most of the people that I've spoken to, that they've sort of put it in a way like this. They say, well, I support the principles, but I have got some fears or worries about the practicalities. And I think that's totally understandable. So this is where we just need to make sure we get some sort of collaboration and working together. If there were better methods and ways of doing things, then I suspect that they would already have been introduced. So what we want to do is know that we're going to move forward and see improvements when things are changed. So yeah, I mean, some of this stuff, of course, was also in the Labour manifesto. So it's no surprise that they're coming forward with this now. And they framed it all, didn't they, as, we are a real nation of animal lovers and everybody wants to see animals being treated better, whether they're farm animals or pets or wild animals. So that's where we are. But as I said, we just need to make sure that we've got some better techniques or better ways of doing things, or access to better pain relief or anaesthetics, so that everybody can keep on doing what they do, but we're seeing better treatment of animals.
Hugh, the animal welfare lobby really seems to have the ear of this government on animal welfare, but this is also about unintended consequences, isn't it?
The approach at the moment is, ideological, and I get that, and it's good to have standards and it's good to have aspirations of where you want to get to. It's quite ideological in terms of how it's laid out. One of the things that's interesting on the statement, the thing that goes with the consultation start from DEFRA, there's loads of lovely warm quotes in there from Compassion in World Farming. So it's, a lot of people will be looking at it going, hang on, is this the government or is this some sort of lobby group? It's a bit one-sided. If we take lambs, for example, so castration and tail docking of lambs, something that has happened for a very long time, not that should be in any way, shape or form, any justifications to why you should do it. The problem you have there with the castration is there is no licensed anaesthetic available in the UK at the moment. There are local anaesthetics like lignocaine, for example, which you can use when you're dehorning calves, and people do use that for dehorning calves, have done for many, many years. It is not licensed for sheep. It would be daft of the minister probably to recommend that you go complete flock, UK flock-wide off-label in terms of medicine use. there are potentially some other solutions here. So, for example, in Australia, they use New Zealand, they use like a topical cream. It's a bit like if you take your kids to get a blood test or an injection now, the old doctor gets the magic cream out, don't they? And they put it under a bit of cling film on their skin and it numbs the skin. Same thing, very similar. That is licensed in other countries for use with sheep. It is not here. So there are solutions through this. There are also management solutions, i.e., I don't know, when we had sheep, we didn't castrate any single males at all because we'd got them away at 8 or 10 weeks off grass. They'd be gone, done, dusted. We wouldn't do their tails either so that we could see who they were. There's an argument to say if you don't tail lambs, you're going to use more chemical insecticide to keep the fly strike at bay, and that's a perfectly valid argument, and it's very true. So I think there's a lot of sorting out to do here. And the worry is that ministers charge ahead, and particularly with the castration thing, they charge ahead and actually create more problems in terms of unwanted pregnancies and all the things all the reasons that we castrate lambs for. There are lots of management reasons why we do that, whether it's around better growth, whether it's about preventing unwanted pregnancies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And to reiterate, this isn't about banning some of these practices. This is about tightening the regulations, at least when it comes to castrating and tail docking. But if we're tightening the rules here in the UK and still importing lamb produced in countries with more relaxed animal welfare rules, British farmers are going to be at a disadvantage competing against cheap, low welfare imports. Unfair competition.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you've only got to go back to the 90s when they banned the tether sow system was banned in the late 90s. We did it. The rest of Europe the Commission had an aspiration to ban it across the rest of Europe, but all the other countries wriggled out of it, or most of them did. Certainly the big producing ones did, and never did it. And we look at how it decimated the UK pig industry. Very rapidly over a 10-year period, the volume of pork produced here crashed to the floor because suddenly we did not have the same commercial rules that they had. So you've got to think about things like that. It's ridiculous, when you talk about the final. And I don't disagree with the fact that I'm happy to pay for free-range eggs. I get that not everyone is. I don't disagree with getting rid of the final colony cage systems with chickens. But then you've still got eggs coming in from abroad, namely Ukraine is one place that sends loads of eggs in here, where they've still got the old cage system. I mean, it's absolutely bonkers. And it's all, either going into food service or manufacturing, so you don't see it directly. And so the nice ones you buy at the supermarket in Waitrose, you feel good about yourself. But then you buy a jar of some other product, mayonnaise or whatever, and Lord knows where the eggs came from. So you've got to have some sort of trade protection. Otherwise, it's a complete waste of time. And the other thing, which for me stands out like a sore thumb, and I say this very calmly and not wanting to invoke any craziness, there is no mention anywhere in this strategy of anything around religious slaughter. And we know there is a fair chunk of lambs killed in the UK that are not stunned for religious reasons. And on one hand, you want to ban the castration of them or put pain relief in when they're castrated because, you've got to improve that and those outcomes for the lambs. But then a couple of months later, it goes to the factory and gets its throat cut while it's fully conscious and has to bleed to death. And that, to my mind, is complete nonsense. So there are ways forward on this. There is stunned halal practice. Pretty much all of New Zealand's sheep are killed doing that. Loads of factories here do that. So it's not a very fair consultation at all, I think, or the strategy in terms of how they've set the goalposts out at this stage. So there's a lot of work to be done.
Thank you, Hugh. And sheep farmers and indeed everyone else has until the 9th of March to submit their views on the consultation. Animal welfare campaigners are going to be having their say, as well as other players in the supply chain. That's sheep producers, supermarkets, processors, and indeed others. It's not too onerous. It'll probably take about an hour, and we'll put a link to the consultation on the show notes page to this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast.
The Farmers Weekly podcast. The Farmers Weekly podcast.
You're listening to the Farmers Weekly podcast. Welcome along. A very big welcome, always a warm welcome, and good to have you with us. You can email us podcast@fwi.co.uk. And if you're in the UK itself, you can message us by texting the word farm followed by a message to 88440. A bit of a livestock focus this week, illegal meat imports and animal welfare. But coming up in a few minutes, a story of interest to everyone in farming and indeed the future of our industry. First though, Louise, some big news from Wales, a new president for the Welsh Farming Union, NFU Cymru.
Yeah, congratulations to Abby Reader, who I believe is the first female president of NFU Cymru. Well done, Abby. Fantastic. I know that you'll have a lot on your plate, and I'm absolutely sure that you'll address it all with some relish and do a great job. Brilliant.
Yeah, third generation mixed farmer Abby Reader, farming in partnership with her parents and uncle just outside Cardiff, elected president of NFU Cymru. Big on dairy, Hugh, big on sheep and beef. You've worked a little bit with Abby in the past, haven't you?
Yeah, over the years, she's great, brilliant, and she's got a lot on her plate because, of course, they got the Welsh elections coming up this spring. So there'll be plenty to talk about. And as usual, they're all sort of still trying to work out how best to do farm support amongst just many, many other things. But it's absolutely well-deserved. And also a big thank you to Aled. Aled Jones was the president for 2 terms, I think, and again, did an amazing job. A smashing guy. Big thank yous to Aled as well, because he's been involved at various levels in NFU Cymru over many, many years. So, some good news there, and the very best of luck to Abby.
Yeah, best of luck to Abby. And Hugh, what's new in your world this week? Autonomous farming and robots, it says here.
Well, I meant to mention it the other week because before Christmas I was taken by my father-in-law on some Tesla thing in Shepherd's Bush, and we got to meet Olympus, the Tesla robot, which served popcorn. And I noticed there was some talk last week at Lama about AI and robots, particularly within the dairy context. And that's what I suddenly remembered, this Tesla robot. Now, it was serving us popcorn. It was humanoid. I don't know if you've seen it. It didn't move around much on its feet, but it was turning and it was serving popcorn and it was waving at you, it was handing it to you. It was able to grip things. And it's pretty amazing. But for me, what was amazing was talking to the people there. They were saying that these robots already work doing sort of stacking batteries and sort of menial jobs like that in the Tesla factory. And their objective is that these robots will be $20,000 units, which I just find staggering. And you think, and I said to the guy, I said, could I buy one to sweep the yard? And he said, well, yeah, probably in about 4 years you can. And it just got me thinking about the whole robot thing. We've had robots milking cows for 20, nearly 30 years. There's robot tractors out there. But when you see that humanoid form, robot, I assume that's the correct terminology, it really made me think about the impact this automation will have on society as a whole, let alone the potential impact it could have on our farm businesses, but on society as a whole, where suddenly it takes out all of these fairly mundane tasks, and it could potentially displace huge amounts of people. It could also make things really efficient. It's like, the Industrial Revolution, where employment goes mad high and growth goes high because all these businesses are making so much money. It's a bizarre thing, but yeah, one to watch.
Humanoid robots, are they going to revolutionise farming like they're revolutionising the car industry? One to watch. Right now, though, we're watching the markets. Hugh, what's happening?
Thank you very much, Johann. Finished deadweight this week, 643.2. That drops back another 4p on the week. Many processors this week, when you speak to people, trying to pull the price back by about 15 pence. There's quite a few people holding on to cattle at the moment. Live weight, 362.2. That's back almost 9p on the week. When we look at the sheep markets, it's eased slightly as well, actually. SQQ deadweight 713.6, that's back 7p on the week. The live weight drops back around 10p, 322.9. The pig price, I'm afraid, goes back a penny, 192.2. Arable markets, pretty rubbish, actually. Feed wheat 163.50. That has dropped a massive 30p on the week. Milling wheat 173.50. That's dropped £4 on the week. Feed barley's actually gone up. It's 151.30 apparently. That's gone up about £1.10p. Oilseed rate 408.30. That's gone up about a fiver. Feed peas 209.80. That's gone up 80p. Feed beans 205. That's dropped 60p on the week. And diesel has gone up by just over a penny, or just under a penny, about half a p. 67.16, up from 66.7. Just take solace that a year ago you were paying 72.7p a litre for lovely red diesel to fill your tractor.
The Farmers Weekly Podcast. The Farmers Weekly Podcast.
And finally, a new organisation aims to ensure farming is seen as a modern profession and attractive to the next generation of industry leaders. The Society of Agriculture has been formed by the merger of the Institute of Agricultural Management and the British Institute of Agricultural Consultants. A key goal is to secure chartered status for professional excellence and leadership in farm consultancy and management. Well, we're joined now by Paul Harris, founder of HR leadership and management experts Real Success. Paul, you've written recently a white paper calling for a fundamental reset in the way that farming treats and develops its future leaders. That seems to be what the Society of Agriculture is doing as well. We need to put people first in farming, is what you're saying.
Absolutely, Johann. Thank you for asking me to contribute here. Yeah, having been in the sector now for 13 years and having come from outside the sector originally, we've been working hard, I say, over the last decade, really, trying to bring the people welfare side of agriculture to an equal level of importance that we've given to animal welfare. If it's a livestock farm, land management, if we're more of a land-based farm. And what we've discovered really is consistently the industry is excellent at investing in machinery, science, technology. It really has made incredible strides over the last decade in particular. But actually, when we look at the way that the industry manages its people, it just hasn't caught up. Now, some have. There are people who have modernised and taken a positive approach, but we're now in a situation where we have very few people wanting to join our industry. And when they do, more importantly, we're struggling to hold on to them. So that's what the white paper is really talking about and how we can address that.
One of the things we covered on the podcast a couple of weeks ago was this idea that maybe sometimes we're too moany as an industry. We actually put people off joining or going for a career in agriculture because we sometimes come across as though we're not really happy with our lot in life, be it for inheritance tax or whatever it might be. You're suggesting that the biggest threat is no longer, or isn't a labour shortage, but it's a failure of leadership culture and people management. We need to zhuzh things up a little bit.
Yeah, and I think what you've just said, Johann, is true, and it's not to be critical of the industry. It's a tough job, agriculture. It's not been helped, particularly in the last 18 months, by some of the government's policies, which thankfully are now they're perhaps now listening to the industry. But you're right in terms of we do tend to play the victim mode quite a lot and suggest that nobody really understands us and nobody wants to work for us. And then we had a period which we were saying, particularly around inheritance tax, that it was the end of farming as we know it. Well, that doesn't really encourage people to want to join a sector or build a career in an industry that can offer so much, particularly to young people. Anybody who's interested in science and technology, the industry is buzzing with new products. Llama last week was a really innovative show where, people are still bringing out new machinery and new methods for doing stuff. Dairy tech is coming up soon for the dairy industry, where there'll be, people showing again new machines and opportunities to improve the sector. And yet, yeah, you're right. Sometimes you talk at farmers and you think, crikey, put your face straight almost. This is a fantastic opportunity. And I think we just need to talk it up a little bit. And unfortunately, however we look at the industry, whatever we're doing in it, when we talk about resilience, when we talk about sustainability, to talk about a resilient business or a sustainable business without talking about people misses, to me, one of the fundamental factors that will make sure our business is resilient and sustainable. So we've got to put some effort into improving our skills in that area, whether it's training or new pathways for people, standards of working conditions on farm, which are still, pretty rough in many cases. We've got to start addressing those, or we're really on a burning bridge to something that is quite scary. If people don't want to join our sector because we don't have those leadership and management skills, and our working conditions and our working hours and our track record on health and safety is poor, it's time to address those issues head on.
A more professional approach then. What do you think of this idea from the Society of Agriculture that perhaps we need some kind of chartered status for the sector?
Well, I think particularly there are some fantastic advisors and consultants that are trying to help the sector, sometimes pushing against closed doors with some of our farming clients, but actually there is a really high standard of people advising the sector. TIA have tried to help farmers on farm to improve their skills. I think the Society of Agriculture is really looking to bring together people who are advising the sector and have some sort of standard to that. So any form of professionalization of what we're doing on farm has to be a good thing for the sector, has to be a good thing for potential recruitment into the sector, and has to be a good thing for the long-term sustainability. So I support it, and I will definitely be becoming a member.
And farmers themselves investing in leadership, communication, and better working conditions, I guess. I think you've spoken before, Paul, about this strange badge of honour that we seem to have in farming, that the more hours we work, the better we are. That's not necessarily right, though, is it?
No, and I think this is where we do need this sort of mindset shift, or even a cultural shift in the industry, that it's not about how many hours we work that gives us a sort of sense of credibility, particularly as leaders. I think, there's definitely a place to lead from the front and not expect people on our farms to do things that we wouldn't be prepared to do. But this idea that we are somehow part-time if we only want to do 50 hours a week gives us a very difficult challenge in recruiting people, particularly from outside the sector. So the future of the industry doesn't depend on those in their 40s, 50s and 60s who are still on the farms. It depends on bringing new people of all age groups, but particularly young people, into our sector. And when they look at us and we say, it's a fantastic career, you've got to work for 10, 11, 12 days before you get a day off. And by the way, you'll be doing 10 hours a day. They look at you as if you're an alien, So we've got to start recognizing that there are challenges to that. I know anyone listening might be saying, but that requires more labour. Well, the whole thing's a circular challenge, that we probably need more people in our sector. We may need to discuss as an industry. My white paper addresses this, that we may need to talk as an industry about the price of the product that we get, whether it's our grain or it's our livestock. But ultimately, we are in control on our own farms as to how many hours people work per day, what our rotas are. And this idea that you're part-time if you only want to work 40, 50 hours a week. It's a mindset shift that, as somebody who's been in the industry now for over a decade, and I've seen too much of it, we need to change that. And that's what I'm challenging the industry to do. And the good news is farmers are changing that. There are lots of farms we work with now where they've got, more part-time staff, most of them local, working sometimes 2 or 3 shifts a week. Sometimes it's 40, 50 hours a week, or they're only working 5, 6 days before they get a day off. So it can be done, Johann, it can be done.
Sir Paul Harris there from Real Success, raising some good points about the new Society of Agriculture. We need to be more professional as a sector to attract the best people, Louise.
Yeah, we do. I mean, I must admit that I am seeing quite a bit of change. I think the work-life balance argument or discussion, I think that really is progressing for when I go onto farms now. Definitely that things are improving on that side. I think health and safety has improved massively, and I do appreciate that there's still some way to go with that. When you go onto a farm which has got a really good team culture and good staff facilities and all those things that perhaps in other professions we take for granted, then you really do see good people working on these farms, and you see some really fantastic results from what they're doing. I mean, things like new staff inductions, I suppose, and annual reviews, they are now much more common than they ever were. As I said, Storic probably still got quite a way to go, but this is happening, and it's happening at a time when the sector's under really quite some cost pressure. So I'm actually encouraged by what I'm seeing when I'm out and about on farms. I do understand that Paul thinks we can take it up to the next level, and that's really important. We've always got to have aspiration, haven't we? But I do think we should also acknowledge that some good work has been done and is going on.
And this idea of professionalising farming, Hugh, we've heard it before, this idea of chartered status, a chartered agriculturalist, as it were. Good idea?
Chartered muck scraper. Yes, I suppose if people want to get involved with that, that's great. I totally echo what Louise has said about a lot of businesses really stepping up in terms of staff training and just the whole HR thing in terms of how they manage. I suppose also, though, let's bear in mind there will be people listening to this podcast who have been successful in their farming career, and they will say, yeah, that's all great. But, there are times when, and particularly, okay, this is possibly applicable to owners and their spouses and their children. If you want to grow something, you've got to put the hard yards in. You're right that we shouldn't have a badge of honour for 80-hour working weeks for, all employees. But equally, let's not lose sight of reality here. If you want to get ahead, you've got to put the hours in. And you could say, well, you should just work smarter, not harder. Well, it's not as simple as that. There are times when you can do that. But I think overall, for all staff, teams and people, what we just miss so much, and I've said this before, and it gets talked about every few years, and a lovely graphic gets put up on the wall in a meeting room. There is no succession in terms of career succession path really in agriculture. And there's no training that bolts on easily. It's a minefield. It's confusing. It doesn't join up. In places, it's really expensive. And I've used this example before. If you look at what the building industry does, civil engineering does, their CITB cards, they have a card which they pay everyone, whether you're the lowest of the low, right up to the guy managing the site or indeed the company. If you've got vocational qualifications, all of your record is on that card, and they pay like 26 quid a year or something to register the card. And when they go to a building site, it's scanned in, and they know that they're qualified to drive a digger, lay a brick, plaster a wall, wire a plug, do whatever. It's all on there. And it's almost like, the more points they get, the more qualifications they get, the more value they are to those sites when they go there. And we have nothing like that in agriculture. And you're right, Louise, the health and safety has improved, but look at the death rate. It's still pretty blooming horrendous. So good aspirations, but there are some serious hard yards to do to try and get systems in place which actually deliver. And also at a time when farm businesses are really stretched, you're then going to turn around and say, well, you've got to invest in this HR stuff and invest in your team. And people want to do that, but, budgets are limited.
Yeah, budget's limited, time limited too. Look, we'll put a link to the Society of Agriculture on the show notes page of this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. We'll also put a link to Paul Harris's white paper on what we need to do to put people first in farming. That, though, is about it for this episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast. We've run out of time. We do hope you've enjoyed what you've heard. If you have, please do subscribe to us. And if you've really enjoyed what you've heard, do, as always, leave us a review. We'll be back next week with all the latest news, views and analysis of all the big stories affecting UK agriculture. But for now, until next week, I'm Johann Tasker.
I'm Louise Impey.
And I'm Hugh Broom.
Thank you for listening. This episode of the Farmers Weekly podcast was brought to you in partnership with Tesco.